Can we have factual questions and not your opinion? If you can ask a question and as brief as possible.
Just picking up on the final.
There we go. Just picking up on that final point about clickbait. I mean, and again, reflecting on that discussion Monica repeated with the ABC, you have a situation where if money has to come into an organisation, it's got to come in by according to measurable criteria. There's people set criteria. Unfortunately, even in organisations like the ABC, which was constructed to do the other thing, that is not be dependent on how much money you were getting per head of audience, the ABC are now forced down the road of clickbait. That is, how many clicks are we getting per head to evaluate our programs? So you're caught in the same dilemma. Even the public broadcaster is now dragged into that game. And before I left the ABC, a whole series of decisions were made in an area like Radio National, which was supposed to be the jewel in the crown of independence, of producers being told they were being assessed by the number of clicks they were getting.
But the funding's not dependent on it, though, John.
Ultimately, if the board believe the funding is dependent on it, and if the political masters are saying the funding is dependent on it, then you've got a bit of a problem.
Well, the ABC spends money on Google to ensure its stories get seen higher on the page. So yes, it does depend. It doesn't depend on it. But John's right insofar as news executives at ABC want to see high-performing stories. How do you measure performance? Well, you measure it by clicks, by analytics.
But they always have. I mean, I think it's a total myth that the ABC, at some point prior to the internet, was not interested in who was viewing and listening to their programs. They have always been obsessed with it. It's just that they went through about 30 years where they were not allowed to say that. And so if you ever said ratings, as you would remember, John, you were driven out the door and you couldn't say the word ratings. So this is just a kind of digital manifestation of it, really. I mean,
funding... It was hypercharged manifestation of it. It's a second by second, minute by minute.
Well, there's a political, there's an overarching political narrative now, which is that that the ABC says we need to reach as many people, we need to reach into every corner of the ABC. And the government says that. That's right. So
but Gavin Morris says that. It's not the government saying that. It's the news director of the ABC saying.
So the ABC now says we need to reach into every corner of the ABC, and that is pivotal. That is critical to our existence, our continued existence. So, only to that extent is funding dependent on the sort of. It's not the same as the clickbait. My argument is it's not the same as the sort of clickbait that we are seeing, that phenomenon in commercial work.
I mean, I'm not here to pick on the ABC. I should say that, but I'm not. But I'm not. I would say one quote I use for students is a quote from Kate de Brito. Kate de Brito is the editor-in-chief of news.com.au. 10 million Australians go to news.com.au every month. 10 million. It's the single biggest website. And she has a quote, which is this: "If no one clicks on your story, did you write it?"
Yeah.
It's an existential crisis, right? If no one clicks on your story, if a tree falls in the forest.
I was going to say, is that the equivalent of, one hand clapping and tree falling in a forest? Right. We've got another.
Thanks for the presentation. I just noticed that during the election campaign, whatever, the ABC is always, not the election campaign, during the government, whatever the government is, they are not happy with the ABC. Either Labour, when they're in government, they are not happy because they are not running their policy or their ideology. The same also with the Liberal things. In the same time, when the election also we see a newspaper is really blatantly attacking the opposition or whatever in the partner. So, is any comment on that? Is that neutrality of the journalism, and how can we accept the trust, the the journalism in this way.
I can remember way back Neville Wran probably was one of the best haters of the ABC, the Labor Premier, who said, "You from the ABC, I'm not going to answer your questions."
Yeah, let's not mention Joe Bjelke-Petersen.
No.
I mean, look, politicians have always, politicians in power, whatever parties in power, have always disliked the ABC. That's just it's just the way it is. And that is because the ABC, you would assume, let's assume for a moment that reflects the fact that the ABC is actually doing its job. That is, it's shining a light on those in power, on parties in power, and questioning what they do. So therefore, they're going to be disliked. The other question, though, I think is a more interesting one, and that is the role of private media in political partisan, in the political positioning, and the role that they assume and the impact they have in federal election campaigns. The last election campaign, what we saw was News Corp, which was just blatantly pro-coalition, and to the point where its front page news didn't look like news at all. I mean, it just looked like a propaganda sheet, and news was kind of distorted so that it was really easy to discern fact from lie. It was all a lie. So, I mean, I think that's where we get into really, really dangerous territory when private media are using their power in that way. And Rick Morton famously, lost his job commenting on it at UTS, as it turns out. But when he commented that the crazy had been doubled up in the election campaign at News Corp, and that its front page didn't resemble news at all, he paid the price. Such is their belief, their self-belief, and their power. But yes, a very dangerous situation. I agree with you.
And just to add one little thing to that, I think the real issue, I agree with everything Monica just said, by the way, but I think the real danger in all this is the media has become atomized. And it's atomized at nearly every level. The business model's atomized, the stories, that story level is atomized, and in a corporate sense it's atomized. So I think we're seeing this great and sad, rather, sort of the middle. Is there money in the middle now? I wonder. I mean, the Sydney Morning Herald, I think, is sort of trying to head back to the middle a little bit more than it was, but the money seems to be on the extremes, which goes back to this comment about commentary, engagement, analytics, those sorts of things. It's a shame. I think the other way of looking at that news limited bias from the last election is whether it affected anything. I mean, the one way for the news media to really test its power is to do exactly what news did at the last election, because maybe it didn't change anyone's vote.
Just taking the role of Parliament or their control on journalists from Australia from a global stage, we have seen the authoritarian in the government's Middle East, how they treat the journalists, and we have got the Khashoggi affair in front of us. And then we have got semi-authoritarian control of news media in Turkey, how they have closed down the newspapers willy-nilly. And now we are seeing it in the largest democracy in the world, in India, where they have locked the journalists in Kashmir. For the last 1 month, there is no news coming out from there. The local journalists have just been shut up. They're not even given a phone line to relay their stories of what's happening. I mean, as journalists, those who are concerned about journalist freedom, the global, there's no outcry from us. I mean, what can we do about that?
Well, actually, we were talking about this last week, weren't we, at the Peter Western Media Freedom Conference, and the need for journalists and journalist organisations to band together, unions to band together to scream from the rooftops about what's going on. And I don't think we have, particularly in Australia, combined to use our collective power and our voice and the platforms available to us to actually mount those arguments. I mean, I agree with you. We see it happening all across the world. You left off Russia from that list, which is whose treatment of journalists is particularly appalling, and the Philippines. And Maria Ressa has just been in Australia talking about this particular issue. So, would people listen? I mean, there are people like Attard and various other media people around who believe that the public would be amenable to these messages and listen sympathetically. I personally am not 100% sure that they're that interested. I think one of the byproducts of the digital era is the echo chamber and people being very comfortable in the particular echo chamber in which they live. So to force them out of that and to try to impress upon them the benefits of what is outside of the echo chamber, I don't know, we could try, of course.
Yeah, two quick comments on that. It's a great question or great comment. One is it does have to start, it can start at a community level, but it really has to be a government level. Our governments need to make a real big noise about such things. Secondly, and this is the optimistic way of looking at it, when Trump came to power in the US in the late 2016 into 2017, there was a rise in subscriptions, the Trump bump of what's called quality news journalism. This is perhaps a byproduct of that. I mean, it goes, again, if we want a free press, we have to support a free press. I don't keep banging on about this, but it really does get down to that level that we do have to make a noise about it rather than complain about it in the breach, as it were, when it's gone.
And I think we are running towards the end, so you'll be lucky last, unless it's a very quick question.
I wonder what you make of, while there's been a lot of talk about how the public have stopped becoming media consumers, the flip side of that is that there's all these digital-only platforms that are absolutely thriving on a patronage basis. So I wonder what journalists make of that in terms of consumer behavior. How do you interpret what is it that attracts that patronage from these people, given that journalism itself is so ill-defined? I mean, they haven't made a claim towards anything, but people are actually supporting them.
That's a great question. I believe journalism has to fish where the fish is, right? Where the fish are. So I have two teenage kids, and they would say they don't read any journalism. It breaks my heart every day. The truth is, they do consume journalism because they go on Snapchat, and by sheer accident, they actually run into all sorts of journalistic things. Some of it is the Daily Mail, I might add, but some of it is actually The Economist, weirdly. They do this by accident because The Economist is on Snapchat. I mean, we need to work out how journalism gets to use TikTok and those sorts of things. The problem is there's such a proliferation of these channels that you can't really keep up. I mean, and the ABC has this problem. It keeps chasing audience all over the place. Snapchat, TikTok. Oh my God, how do we do journalism on TikTok? If you don't know what TikTok is, go and look. But you'll get it. Or YouTube. How do we do YouTube? Like a blogger like PewDiePie. How many is 100 million views of PewDiePie? Right, it's the world's.
I might add that I'm not thinking of those channels. I'm thinking of far more intellectual than those.
But that's just the extreme versions.
I mean, online platforms that make a point of inviting real experts like scientists.
Like the conversation.
The conversation, yes, that's more mainstream. But
where are we going?
Quillette, Arc Digimedia, Ario, and all of this. And people are finding intellectual gratification in those channels. So having said that, a lot of that is opinion, but at the same time, my point is, how are you interpreting consumer behavior from that success?
You can go. You have a go.
No, you go.
Oh, okay. Well, the latest digital news report showed that 63% of Australians avoid the news. All right? 63%. Now, occasionally, sometimes, or often avoid the news. The good news on that is 37% of people aren't.
But I also think it's kind of reflective of the echo chamber effect, in a broader sense, that people are looking for information that they find personally acceptable, satisfying, and that makes sense to them. And so they're trying to and I think all we are really doing is trying to make sense of the world. And there's so much information out there that people will just grab at whatever it is that helps them make sense of their particular world. And, like Peter, I mean, I think for me, one of the interesting things is the way young people are accessing news and information. I've got a 21-year-old who's actually now working with Peter, but who, for many, many years, I mean, I still reckon he would struggle to tell you, what the free-to-air stations were on television because he just hasn't grown up in that era. And, one of the funniest stories that I can recall to tell you, which might get a giggle from some, is that Lee Sales, who's a friend of mine and who comes to our house quite often and has since my child was really little, when he was 18 years old, he walked through the lounge room and saw the 7:30 report on TV and he said, "What's Lee Sales doing? What's Lee doing on television?"
That was a great story.
He literally said that. So that is how unengaged they are from mainstream media. And Peter is absolutely dead right. We have to fish where the fish are. We have to take journalism to where the eyeballs are. And for young people, that means social media, not the social media that us oldies engage in, not Facebook. They don't, they might read their Facebook feed, but it's got to kind of ping and attract their attention. They certainly don't use Twitter. I have to force them in our journalism school. The first semester, I say you're going to have to follow 500 people in semester 1, 250 people and organisations you like and approve of, and 250 you don't. And I need you to show me at the end of the semester. They really struggle with that. They really, really struggle. They don't like Twitter. But they do read Reddit, and they live on Reddit. I think Snapchat's a phase. It's kind of come and gone. I think the ABC's ploughed a lot of money into it and for no reason at all, like they've done with some other things. But I think that, we've got to take journalism to where people are to broaden their taste for different forms of information.
I can't think of a better way to end today's discussion. Would you please thank both Monica and Peter for bringing us the facts. And at this point, I'd like to call upon James O'Brien, Manager, ABC Regional Local. Yes. You were going to ask a question, weren't you?
I did have a question, and I have a lot of family who lives in northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland who may share on Facebook lots of stories. I've got a question about how to deal with journalism in our lives, and it's because I have a lot of family in northern New South Wales and southeast Queensland. I won't generalise about them, but they share a lot of false information online, and I spend a lot of time saying, Shirley, that's actually not correct. Is there anything you would offer in terms of dealing with the journalism in our lives that others could take with them? Aside from saying you're wrong.
Well, there's an interesting, that's such a big question, because how do you encourage someone to privilege facts and evidence-based journalism over the easy sort of sense of, oh, that's great, I agree with that, it's great, it must be true kind of thing, which is very much a human emotion, and we live in a supercharged environment. One aspect of this, I think, and I possibly would say this, is the fact-checking units. The ABC has a fact-checking unit. One thing that always pains me a little bit is that the fact-checks of the ABC fact-check unit don't somehow get to the journalists who say to the politicians, hey, Prime Minister, that's been fact-checked and you're talking crap. We still live on this sort of get the grab. So the grab, grabs, as we all know, are not necessarily fact-based. They're just emotion-based. They play to the emotion. So there is this kind of virtuous loop that could be perhaps tightened a little bit. I don't think that solves the problem of your relatives, by the way.
No, but you are going to solve the problem of expressing our appreciation to Monica, aren't you?
Monica, thank you very much. We've known each other 20 years. You were terrific on television last night. Thank you for being here.
Yes, and I'd now like to call upon the Consul General of Bangladesh, Mr. Kandahar Mazdul Alam, to present to Peter.
Well, thank you. Very kind. That's very nice. Thank you.
And now we have Mr. Ahmed Polat, our Executive Director, our cousin. You're going to our closing remarks. Thank you.